Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The blue and white lights of the engine core dimmed behind him as engineer Kim Do-young shut down the jump drive. After 3 years of building this ship from crashed alien metal and stolen technology, they had finally done it. Humanity had reached the stars. "Sir, we have something on sensors," said Commander Cho Hye-jin from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panel as data streamed across her screen. "It's massive, bigger than anything we've ever seen." Tae-ho moved to stand beside her. The main screen flickered to life, showing a structure so large it made their ship look like a grain of sand next to a mountain. It was circular, with thousands of docking bays and strange towers reaching out like the arms of a metal octopus. Lights blinked all along its surface, and ships of every shape and size moved around it like insects around a hive. "What do you think it is?" asked Dr. Park Ji-won. She was their best scientist and the only one who could speak 3 alien languages. They had learned from the crashed ships on Earth. Her dark eyes were wide with wonder as she stared at the massive station. "It looks like a city," said Kim Do-young. He pushed his glasses up his nose and leaned forward to get a better look. "Or maybe a meeting place. Look at all those different ships. I count at least 50 different designs." The communication system suddenly crackled to life. A voice spoke in a language none of them had heard before, but their translation computer started working. The words appeared on their screens in Korean, and then in English. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. State your origin and purpose or you will be destroyed." Tae-ho looked at his crew. They had come so far and worked so hard to get here. He was not about to turn back now. "Open a channel," he said. "Channel open, sir," replied the communications officer. "This is Captain Lee Tae-ho of the Earthship Indomitable. We come in peace from the planet Earth in the Sol system. We wish to make contact with other intelligent species." There was a long silence. Then the voice came back, but this time it sounded different. Surprised. "Did you say Earth? Sol 3? That is impossible. Our records show that system contains only primitive life forms. You must be mistaken." Dr. Park Ji-won stepped forward. "May we speak with your leaders? We have traveled very far to meet you." Another pause. Then a different voice came through, deeper and more formal. "You will dock at Bay 7749. You will submit to scanning and questioning. Do not resist, or you will be eliminated." The massive station grew larger as they approached. Tae-ho could see that it was even more impressive up close. The metal was smooth and perfect, with no welds or joints visible anywhere. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved in perfect formation, following traffic patterns that must have taken centuries to develop. "Sir," said Cho Hye-jin quietly, "I'm reading weapon signatures all over that station. Big ones. If they wanted to destroy us, they could do it without even trying." "Noted," said Tae-ho, "but we knew this was dangerous when we left Earth. Humanity has never backed down from a challenge." They docked with a soft thump that barely shook the ship. Through the airlock window, they could see strange figures moving around in what looked like environmental suits. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, but others crawled on multiple limbs or floated in the air. "Remember," said Dr. Park Ji-won as they prepared to leave the ship, "we represent all of humanity. Everything we do here will determine how our species is remembered." The airlock opened, and they stepped into a world beyond imagination. The corridor was huge, with ceilings that disappeared into darkness above them. The walls glowed with soft light, and symbols in hundreds of different languages scrolled past like news feeds. Creatures that looked like walking crystals guided them through hallways filled with beings from across the galaxy. They entered what could only be described as the largest room any human had ever seen. It was a sphere so vast that its far walls were lost in mist. Thousands of platforms floated in the air at different levels, each one holding representatives from different worlds. Some platforms held creatures that looked like giant insects, others had beings made of what appeared to be living water, and still others held things that human eyes could barely understand. At the center of it all was a platform larger than the rest, where a being that looked like it was made of flowing crystal stood before a panel of judges. Its voice echoed through the chamber as it spoke. The motion before us today concerns the primitive species cleanup protocol for Sol 3. The planet contains carbon-based life forms that show signs of technological development, but our projections indicate they will destroy themselves within the next 100 rotations. The question is whether we should accelerate this process or allow nature to take its course. Tejo felt his blood turn cold. They were talking about Earth, about humanity, and they were discussing whether to wipe them out. Dr. Park Ji-won grabbed his arm. They think we're going to destroy ourselves. They're planning to help it happen, the crystal being continued. The species shows aggressive tendencies and has already developed primitive nuclear weapons. They have also begun to damage their planet's ecosystem. Standard protocols suggest intervention before they can spread beyond their home system. But they haven't spread, said another voice from across the chamber. This one sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Our scouts report no faster-than-light capability. No colonies beyond their home world. They are contained. For now, replied the crystal being. But these species always try to expand. Better to end the problem before it begins. That was enough for Tejo. He stepped forward onto the platform, where they had been told to wait, but instead of staying quiet, he raised his voice. We object. The entire chamber fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes turned toward the small group of humans. The crystal being, who they now realized must be some kind of judge or leader, looked down at them with something that might have been surprise. You object? You are observers here, nothing more. You have no voice in these proceedings. We have every voice, said Tejo. You are talking about our species, our world, our people, and we are here to tell you that your information is wrong. Sound like laughter filled the chamber, but it was not friendly. The crystal being's form shifted and grew brighter. Your species? You claim to be from Sol 3? That is impossible. We have been monitoring that system for thousands of rotations. The dominant species there has barely learned to use fire. Dr. Park Ji-won stepped forward. We are that species. We call ourselves humans, and we have learned much more than fire. The laughter stopped. The crystal being leaned forward, studying them more closely. Even if you speak the truth, what does it matter? You are clearly primitive. Look at your crude technology, your simple clothing, your weak bodies. You are exactly the kind of species we exist to eliminate before you become a problem. Kim Do-young had been quiet through all of this, but now he smiled. It was not a nice smile. Crude technology, he said. Commander Cho, would you please show them how crude our technology is? Cho Hye-jin nodded and pressed a button on the device, at her belt. Suddenly, every light in the massive chamber flickered. The floating platforms wobbled in the air. Alarms began to sound throughout the station. What have you done? Demanded the crystal being. We have shown you what humans do when someone threatens our home, said Tejo. We fight back. The lights went out completely, plunging the chamber into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on throughout the massive station, casting strange red shadows across thousands of alien faces. The floating platforms that had been moving smoothly through the air now drifted without power, bumping into each other and causing panic among their occupants. Captain Lee Tejo watched as beings from across the galaxy suddenly found themselves helpless in the darkness. Report, he said quietly to Kim Do-young. The engineer consulted a small device in his hand. The electromagnetic pulse worked better than expected. Their entire power grid is based on quantum resonance frequencies that we disrupted. It will take them hours to get basic systems back online. Commander Cho Hye-jin had her weapon ready, though she kept it low. Around them, alien security forces were trying to activate equipment that no longer worked. Some carried energy weapons that were now nothing more than expensive clubs, while others had devices that beeped uselessly in the dim light. You have made a grave error, said the crystal being from the central platform. Its voice was no longer commanding, but uncertain. Without the station's power systems, even its translator was struggling to convert its words properly. Dr. Park Ji-won stepped closer to where the alien leaders stood. The only error here was yours. You were planning to destroy our world without even bothering to check if we were actually as primitive as you thought. Impossible, said another voice from the darkness. This one belonged to a creature that looked like a giant crab, its shell gleaming in the red emergency lighting. No species can develop faster than light travel without our guidance. The mathematical principles alone require technology we have never shared. Kim Do-young laughed. You never shared it because you never had to. We took it. The aliens fell, silent at this. Finally, the crystal being spoke again. Took it? From whom? From you, said Teho. Your people have been sending scout ships to our system for decades. Sometimes they crash. We learned to rebuild what we found. A new sound filled the chamber then, something none of the humans had expected. It was the sound of fear. Thousands of alien voices whispering, clicking, and humming in what could only be panic. If a primitive species could reverse engineer their technology, what did that say about their own security? Sir, said Cho Hyojin, pressing her hand to her ear where a communication device was hidden. I'm receiving a signal from home. Admiral Han Woo-jin says the Second Fleet is 3 hours out. Second Fleet? The crystal being had apparently heard this through its failing translator. How many ships do you primitives have? Enough, said Teho simply. That was when the real chaos began. Without their advanced technology working, the alien security forces had to resort to more primitive methods of control. But they had forgotten how to fight without their machines. The humans had not. Lieutenant Bae Min-ho had been waiting near the entrance to the chamber with the rest of their security team. When the lights went out, he moved like he had trained his entire life for this moment. In the low gravity of the station, his movements were faster and more fluid than any of the aliens expected. He reached the first security checkpoint before the guards even realized what was happening. Remember, Teho had told them before they left Earth, they have better technology, but they have been depending on it for thousands of years. We still know how to fight with our hands. Bae Min-ho proved this point by taking down 3 armed guards using nothing but speed and surprise. Their weapons were useless without power, but his training was not. Within minutes, he had secured the entire entrance to the council chamber. Meanwhile, Chief Medical Officer Nam Yun-soo was discovering something interesting about their alien captors. When several of the floating platforms had collided in the darkness, many of the representatives had been injured. Without thinking, she had rushed to help them. What are you doing? Asked a creature that looked like a walking tree. It was holding what appeared to be a broken arm. I'm a doctor, said Nam Yun-soo simply. You're hurt. But we are enemies, said the tree creature, confusion clear in its translated voice. Right now you're a patient, she replied, wrapping the injury with supplies from her medical kit. Word of this spread quickly through the chamber. The humans, who had just crippled their station and taken control of their security, were also helping the wounded. This was not behavior the Galactic Council understood. Dr. Park Ji-won used this confusion to her advantage. She began moving through the darkened chamber, talking to different alien representatives. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Captain, she called out, her voice tight with anger. You need to hear this. Teho made his way over to where she stood with a group of small furry creatures that looked like intelligent rabbits. Tell him what you told me, said Park Ji-won. One of the rabbit creatures spoke in a voice like wind through leaves. Our world was destroyed 300 rotations ago. The council said we were becoming too aggressive, that we might threaten galactic peace. They sterilized our planet from orbit. Sterilized? Asked Teho. Killed everything, said another rabbit creature. Plants, animals, people, everything. We few survived only because we were off-world at the time. Park Ji-won led him to another group, these ones looking like walking flowers with bright petals for heads. The same thing happened to us, said their spokesperson. Our crime was developing defensive weapons. The council decided we were too dangerous to exist. How many? Asked Teho, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Worlds? Asked the flower being. Or species, because the answer to both is hundreds. Teho felt sick. The Galactic Council was not a peaceful organization of advanced civilizations. It was a group of bullies who destroyed anyone they saw as a threat, and Earth had been next on their list. "There are records," said Park Ji-won, "hidden in their databases. They call it galactic gardening. They eliminate species that show too much independence or military potential." That was when Ambassador Yoon Soo-bin arrived. The docking bay doors at the far end of the chamber suddenly exploded inward, and through the smoke came a figure in human military armor. Behind her marched a squad of Earth Marines, their weapons raised and ready. "Sorry we're late," said Yoon Soo-bin, removing her helmet to reveal a stern face and graying hair. Traffic was murder, the crystal being tried one last time to assert authority. "This is an illegal invasion of sovereign space. The Galactic Council will not stand for this aggression." Yoon Soo-bin looked around at the darkened chamber, at the injured aliens being treated by human medics, at the scared faces of species who had lived in fear of the Council for centuries. "The Galactic Council?" she said with a cold smile. "I don't see any Galactic Council here. I see a bunch of bullies who got their lights turned off by the people they were planning to murder." She walked over to where Taeho stood. "Admiral Han sends his regards. The entire Second Fleet is in position around the station. Nothing gets in or out without our permission." "What do you want?" asked the crystal being, its voice now small and defeated. "Justice," said Taeho, "for Earth, for all the species you've destroyed and for the ones you were planning to destroy next." Kim Do-young looked up from a portable computer he had been working on. "Sir, I've been accessing their database while their security was down. You're going to want to see this." On his screen was a star map showing the galaxy. Red dots marked dead worlds, hundreds of them scattered across space like drops of blood. But there was something else, something that made Kim Do-young's hand shake as he pointed to it. "There," he said, "in the center of the galaxy, there are references to something they call the Apex. Every single record I can find mentions it, but they're all encrypted or damaged. Whatever it is, they're terrified of it." Taeho looked at the map, at the red dots marking dead civilizations, at the mysterious center where something waited in the darkness. "Looks like the Galactic Council has been keeping secrets," he said. "Time to find out what they've been hiding." 3 months had passed since the humans had shut down the Galactic Council station, and Captain Lee Taeho was beginning to understand why leadership was considered a burden. He sat in what used to be the Council's command center, now converted into a human operations base, reading reports from across the galaxy. The news was not good. "Sir," said Commander Cho Hyejin as she entered with another stack of data pads, "we have 17 more species requesting protection from their former Council overlords and 3 separate trade disputes that need arbitration. Also, the plant people from Silvery Prime want to know if we can help them regrow their forests." Taeho rubbed his temples. When they had first arrived at the station, he had thought their biggest challenge would be making contact with alien species. Now he was effectively governing a significant portion of the galaxy, and humanity was nowhere near ready for that responsibility. Dr. Park Ji-won entered the room carrying what looked like a glowing blue flower. "The Sylvani sent this as a gift," she said, placing it on his desk. "It's a peace offering. They want to formalize our alliance." "Alliance?" asked Taeho. "Apparently word has spread about how we've been treating the refugees from destroyed worlds. Half the galaxy thinks we're the first truly benevolent species they've encountered in centuries." This was true, though it had happened almost by accident. When Chief Medical Officer Nam Yoon-soo had started treating injured aliens after the station went dark, it had sparked something none of them expected. Humans began helping wherever they could, not because it was strategic or profitable, but because it was the right thing to do. The rabbit creatures whose world had been destroyed were now living in converted cargo bays, but human engineers were working around the clock to build them proper habitats. The flower beings who had lost their homeworld were teaching human botanists about alien plant biology in exchange for help establishing new colonies. Dozens of other species were forming genuine partnerships with humanity. "It's not all good news," said Cho Hyejin. "General Oh Jae-sung arrived yesterday with reports from Earth. The Zephyrian Empire is mobilizing their fleet. So are the Hegemony of Suns and the Machine Collective. They're not happy about humans taking control of galactic politics." Taeho, nodded grimly. He had been expecting this. By conquering the Galactic Council, humanity had upset the balance of power that had existed for thousands of years. Other galactic empires saw them as either a threat to be eliminated or a prize to be claimed. "What's our military strength?" he asked. 47 Earth ships, plus another 130 vessels from species that have joined our alliance, replied Cho Hyejin. But sir, most of our new allies have never fought a real war. The Council kept them too scared and dependent to develop strong militaries. That was the trap they found themselves in. The species that wanted human protection were mostly peaceful races that had been bullied by the Council for centuries. They had technology and knowledge that could help humanity, but they had forgotten how to fight. Dr. Shin Ye-ri, the psychologist who had been studying their new alien allies, had a theory about this. The Council didn't just destroy aggressive species, she had explained. They broke the ones that survived, made them afraid to stand up for themselves, afraid to take risks, afraid to grow strong enough to resist. Engineer Kim Do-young burst into the room, his face pale with excitement and fear. "Sir, I found something in the deep archives about the Apex." He activated a holographic display that showed what looked like star charts from millions of years. Hygo. Ancient symbols covered the screen with translations scrolling past in dozens of languages. "These records go back further than any civilization we've encountered," said Kim Do-young. "They talk about something that existed before the current galactic powers, before the Council, before any of the empires we know about." The hologram shifted to show a single point of darkness at the center of the galaxy. "The Apex isn't a species or an empire," he continued. "It's a single entity. And according to these records, it feeds on the life force of entire civilizations." Taeho stared at the display. "Feeds how?" "By consuming their energy, their consciousness, their very essence. The record suggests it has done this for millions of years, growing stronger with each civilization it devours." Dr. Park Ji-won leaned forward to study the ancient symbols. "This explains everything. The Council's behavior, the systematic elimination of strong species, the constant fear. They weren't just bullies. They were trying to keep everyone weak so the Apex wouldn't notice them." "It gets worse," said Kim Do-young. "The records suggest that the Apex feeds in cycles. It sleeps for thousands of years, then wakes up when it senses civilizations have grown strong enough to be worth consuming. The last feeding cycle was over 50,000 years ago." "And our arrival here?" asked Taeho, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. "Probably woke it up," said Kim Do-young quietly. The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. Humanity had not just conquered a galactic government, they had potentially awakened something that could destroy all life in the galaxy. "Sir," said Cho Hyejin, pressing her hand to her earpiece. "Long-range sensors are picking up something strange. Admiral Han Woo-jin wants to speak with you immediately." The communication screen flickered to life, showing the weathered face of Earth's top military commander. Behind him, Taeho could see the bridge of the flagship with officers running back and forth in obvious urgency. "Captain," said Admiral Han without preamble, "we have a problem. Something big is moving in the galactic core. Our sensors can barely track it, but whatever it is, it's heading this way." "How big?" asked Taeho. "Bigger than anything we've ever seen. The energy signature is off the charts." "And Captain?" The Admiral's face was grim. "It's accelerating." Kim Do-young quickly consulted his ancient star charts. "According to these records, the Apex travels by moving through space itself, bending reality around it. That would explain why our sensors are having trouble tracking it." "How long do we have?" asked Taeho. Admiral Han consulted something off-screen. "At current speed, maybe 2 weeks before it reaches the outer systems, maybe less." Dr. Shin Ye-ri had been quiet through all of this, but now she spoke up. "We need to evacuate the station, get our people back to Earth." "No," said Taeho firmly. "If we run, all our new allies die. The species we've been protecting, the refugees we've been helping, everyone who trusted us. They'll be defenseless." "But sir," said Cho Hyejin, How can we fight something that has been consuming civilizations for millions of years? Tejo looked around at his crew, at the alien allies who had joined them, at the holographic display showing the approaching darkness. The same way we beat the Galactic Council, he said, by refusing to give up. Ambassador Yoon Subin entered the room at that moment, having heard the commotion from down the hall. Captain, I've been in contact with our new allies. The Sylvani are willing to share their biotechnology, the Oceanic Collective has offered, their deep space sensors, and the Crystal Singers want to help with our communications network. They know what's coming? Asked Tejo. They know, she replied, and they're choosing to stay and fight alongside us. Kim Do-young was still studying the ancient records. There might be a way, he said slowly. These symbols here, they mention something called the quantum resonance cascade. It seems to be some kind of weapon or defense system that was used against the Apex before. Before? Asked Dr. Park Ji-won. The records are fragmented, but it looks like there have been other civilizations that tried to fight back. Most failed, but a few managed to hurt it. Maybe even drive it back for a while. Tejo stood up and walked to the large window that showed space beyond the station. Thousands of ships from dozens of worlds floated in formation around them, all crewed by beings who had chosen to trust humanity with their lives. Then that's what we'll do, he said. We'll find this weapon, or build our own. And when the Apex gets here, we'll show it what happens when it messes with the wrong galaxy. Outside the window, something flickered at the edge of sensor range. For just a moment, space itself seemed to bend and twist, as if reality was being pulled by invisible hands. The Apex was coming, and it was hungry. The first sign that the Apex had arrived was not an explosion or an attack, but silence. Every communication channel across the galaxy suddenly went quiet at exactly the same moment. Then slowly, a voice began to speak in the minds of every living being capable of thought. Captain Lee Tejo felt it like ice water in his veins as the alien presence touched his consciousness. Around him on the bridge of the station, every human and alien crew member suddenly stopped what they were doing and looked up with expressions of terror and wonder. So, said the voice that was not a voice, the galaxy has grown interesting while I slept. Through the main viewing window, space itself began to change. Reality twisted and folded like paper being crumpled by invisible hands. Stars moved out of their positions, and in the distance, something that hurt to look at directly began to take shape. Dr. Lim So-young, the quantum physicist who had arrived with Admiral Han Woo-jin's fleet, stared at her instruments with growing horror. The readings don't make sense, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It exists in multiple dimensions at once. It's everywhere and nowhere. Commander Cho Hye-jin tried to activate the station's weapon systems, but her hands were shaking too badly to work the controls. Sir, I can't target it. Every time our sensors lock on, it's somewhere else. The voice continued, and now it carried amusement. I have watched your species for some time, little humans. You interest me. Most races that discover faster than light do so gradually, carefully, with great wisdom. You stole it and immediately used it to start a war. Admiral Han Woo-jin's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship. All vessels prepare for combat. Target that thing with everything we have. Admiral, no, called out Dr. Lim So-young. If we attack it directly, we'll just feed it energy. That's how it works. But it was too late. The combined human and alien fleet opened fire with every weapon they had. Energy beams, missile barrages, and exotic weapons from a dozen different civilizations all struck the Apex at once. For a moment, it seemed to work. The twisted space around the entity flickered and wavered. Then the Apex laughed, and the sound was like the death of stars. Delicious, it said, and suddenly grew larger. The energy from their attack had not hurt it at all. It had made it stronger. That was when the real horror began. 3 star systems on the edge of the galaxy simply vanished. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone as if they had never existed. Billions of lives snuffed out in an instant, their life force flowing into the Apex like water into a drain. This is how it works, the entity explained, its mental voice now, tinged with pleasure. I consume consciousness, fear, despair, the very essence of what makes life meaningful. For millions of years I have traveled from galaxy to galaxy, feeding on civilizations when they reach their peak. Engineer Kim Do-young was frantically working at his computer station, trying to access the ancient records they had discovered. "Sir, there has to be something in these archives. Some weakness, some way to hurt it." Dr. Park Ji-won was studying the readings from the Apex's arrival. "It feeds on fear and despair," she said suddenly. "But what if we don't give it those things? What if we refuse to be afraid?" "Easy to say," replied Cho Hyejin as another star system disappeared from the edge of their sensors. "How do you not be afraid of something like that?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Sergeant Major Park Kyung-ho had been quiet since the Apex arrived, standing near the back of the bridge and watching everything with the calm expression of a professional soldier. Now he stepped forward. "Permission to speak, sir?" Taeho nodded, grateful for anything that might help. "I've been in combat for 20 years, said Park Kyung-ho. "I've seen soldiers face impossible odds, watched men and women charge into certain death because it was the right thing to do. You want to know how you stop being afraid?" He pointed out the window at the apex, which was now close enough that its twisted form filled half the sky. "You get angry instead." The apex seemed to notice this exchange, because its attention suddenly focused on the station. The mental pressure increased until several of the alien crew members collapsed, unable to handle the psychic assault. "Anger," it mused. "Yes, I remember anger. It is almost as nourishing as fear. Please, little soldier, show me your rage." Park Kyung-ho smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You want to see human anger? You just killed billions of innocent people. You threatened our home, our friends, our future, and now you expect us to bow down and accept it." He walked over to where Dr. Lim So-young was working on her quantum calculations. "Doc, that dimensional weapon you've been working on, does it need a human operator?" "Kyung-ho, no," said Taeho, realizing what the sergeant major was planning. "We don't even know if it will work." "It'll work," said Park Kyung-ho with absolute confidence. "Because I'm not going to let that thing win. Not today, not ever." Dr. Lim So-young looked up from her equations with tears in her eyes. "The quantum resonance cascade requires someone to enter the apex's dimensional space and disrupt it from within. The chances of survival are essentially zero." "I've had worse odds," said Park Kyung-ho. He began strapping on a modified space suit equipped with the experimental quantum device. "Besides, someone has to show this ancient monster what humans are really made of." The apex's attention focused on them more intently. "You think to enter my realm, little creature? You think your primitive mind can comprehend dimensions beyond your understanding? I think," said Park Kyung-ho as he sealed his helmet, "that you've never met anyone stupid enough to punch a god in the face." He walked toward the airlock but stopped when Taeho called his name. "Sergeant Major." "Sir?" "Give it hell," Park Kyung-ho saluted. "Always do, sir." The airlock opened and he launched himself into space directly toward the apex. The quantum device on his suit activated, creating a shimmering field around him that allowed him to phase through normal space into the entity's dimensional realm. For a moment nothing happened. Then the apex made a sound that was not quite a roar and not quite a scream. On the bridge everyone could feel its surprise through the psychic link. "Impossible," it said, and for the first time, its mental voice carried uncertainty instead of confidence. In the twisted space around the apex, reality began to flicker and shift as Park Kyung-ho fought something that existed beyond normal physics. Through their instruments, they could track his progress as he moved deeper into the entity's core, disrupting quantum fields that had been stable for millions of years. "What is he doing to it?" asked Admiral Han over the communication link. "Doctor." Lim So-young watched her readings with amazement. "He's not trying to destroy it, he's making it doubt itself. The apex feeds on certainty, on the knowledge that it's superior to every other form of life. But Kyung-ho is showing it something it's never encountered before." "What's that?" asked Taeho. "A human being who refuses to admit he's beaten." The apex's attacks on the nearby star system stopped. Its attention was now completely focused on the single human soldier who had dared to invade its realm. and for the first time in millions of years it was learning what it meant to be afraid. "This is not possible," it said, its mental voice now filled with confusion and growing fear. "No creature should be able to resist my influence. No mind should be strong enough to challenge my will." Park Kyung-ho's voice came through their communication system, distorted by the dimensional barriers, but still clear. "You picked the wrong species to mess with, you cosmic bully," the apex screamed, and this time the sound shattered windows across the station. Something fundamental was changing in the entity's nature, and everyone watching could feel it through the psychic connection. It was learning what it meant to face something that simply refused to give up. Inside the Apex's dimensional realm, Sergeant Major Park Kyung-ho found himself in a place that should not exist. Reality here was like liquid, flowing and changing based on thought and emotion. He could feel the entity's consciousness pressing against his mind, trying to break his will and consume his life force. "You cannot resist me," the Apex said, its voice echoing from everywhere at once. "I have devoured civilizations that spanned entire galaxies. I have consumed the dreams of 1,000,000,000,000 souls. What is one human against such power?" Park Kyung-ho kept moving deeper into the twisted space, following the quantum readings on his suit's display. Every step was a battle against reality itself, but he had been fighting impossible battles his entire life. "You want to know what one human is?" he said, pushing forward against a wave of psychic pressure that would have crushed most minds. "One human is someone who gets up every morning and chooses to keep going, even when everything is against him." The entity tried to show him visions of despair, images of Earth being destroyed and humanity being wiped out. But Park Kyung-ho had seen real war, real loss, real suffering. The artificial nightmares could not break someone who had already faced the worst that life could offer. "You don't understand," he continued, reaching the core of the Apex's dimensional space where its true essence writhed like a living shadow. "You've been picking on civilizations that got soft, that forgot how to fight. You've never met a species that still remembers what it means to struggle." Outside in normal space, Captain Lee Tae-ho watched the readings from Park Kyung-ho's suit with growing amazement. The quantum disruption field was working, but not in the way Dr. Lim So-young had predicted. Instead of destroying the Apex, it was changing it. "Sir," said Commander Cho Hyejin, staring at her instruments in disbelief. "The entity's dimensional signature is shifting. It's becoming less stable." Dr. Lim So-young was furiously running calculations on her computer. "I think I understand what's happening. The Apex exists by feeding on the certainty of its own superiority. It's a predator that has never encountered real resistance. But Kyung-ho is showing it something it can't process." "Which is what?" asked Tae-ho. "That prey can choose to fight back." The psychic connection that had linked every mind in the galaxy to the Apex was changing too. Instead of fear and despair, something else was flowing through it. Hope, determination, the refusal to surrender. On ships throughout the galaxy, beings who had cowered in terror at the Apex's arrival began to stand up. The rabbit creatures who had lost their homeworld started broadcasting messages of resistance. The flower beings whose species had been nearly destroyed began singing songs of defiance. Across thousands of worlds, millions of voices joined together, with a single message: "We will not bow down." Inside the dimensional realm, the Apex was experiencing something it had never felt before. For millions of years it had been the ultimate predator, the final authority in a universe full of prey. Now it was discovering what it meant to be afraid. "This is impossible," it said, its mental voice cracking like breaking glass. "I am eternal. I am inevitable. I am the end of all things." "No," said Park Kyung-ho, reaching out to touch the core of the entity's being. "You're just another bully who never learned to pick on someone your own size." The moment his hand made contact, everything changed. The Apex's scream of rage and fear echoed across multiple dimensions, and its twisted form began to collapse inward. But instead of destroying it, something incredible happened. The entity began to transform. Back on the station bridge, Dr. Park Ji-won was the first to understand what was occurring. "It's evolving," she said with wonder in her voice. The apex isn't just a predator. It's a force of nature, a test that the universe uses to cull weak civilizations. But when it encounters something strong enough to resist it, it becomes something else, finished Dr. Lim So-young. The twisted space around the apex straightened and cleared. The entity's malevolent presence began to fade, replaced by something completely different. Where once there had been hunger and cruelty, now there was curiosity. I remember now, said a new voice, one that carried wisdom instead of malice. This is what I was meant to be. Not a destroyer, but a challenger. Not a consumer of life, but a force that helps life become stronger. Park Kyung-ho's voice came through the communication system, tired but victorious. Control, this is Kyung-ho. The hostile entity has been neutralized. Requesting pickup. Negative, Sergeant Major, came the Apex's new voice, but now it sounded almost friendly. Allow me. Reality folded gently around Park Kyung-ho, and he appeared on the station bridge without warning. His suit was battered and his face was pale, but he was grinning. Sir, he said to Captain Taeho, mission accomplished. Though I think we made a friend instead of killing an enemy. The transformed Apex's presence could still be felt throughout the galaxy, but now it carried a message of challenge rather than threat. For too long, I have been feeding on civilizations that had grown weak and complacent. I had forgotten my true purpose, which is to test species and help them become stronger. Humanity has reminded me of what I was meant to be. Admiral Han Woo-jin's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. The species that the Apex consumed are returning. It's bringing them back. This was true. Throughout space, the star systems that had vanished were reappearing. The billions of lives that had been consumed were being restored, but they came back changed. Stronger, more determined. The experience of facing ultimate extinction and surviving had transformed them. I will remain in this galaxy, said the transformed Apex, not as a destroyer but as a guardian. When civilizations grow too comfortable, too dependent on their technology, too removed from the struggle that made them strong, I will challenge them, not to destroy them, but to remind them of what they can become. Captain Lee Taeho looked around at his crew, at the alien allies who had fought beside them, at the vast expanse of space that now held countless worlds full of beings who had chosen hope over despair. And humanity? He asked. Humanity needs no guardian, replied the Apex with something that might have been amusement. You are the species that reminded me what I was supposed to be. You are the ones who showed the galaxy that even the smallest voice can change everything if it refuses to be silenced. Dr. Park Ji-won stepped forward. What happens now? Do we go back to the way things were? There is no going back, said Ambassador Yoon Subin. We've changed the entire galaxy. The old powers, the old fears, the old ways of thinking. All of it has been challenged. She was right. Across space, new alliances were forming. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together. The Galactic Council's reign of terror was over, replaced by something humanity had brought. With them from their small blue world, the idea that everyone deserved a chance to stand up and fight back. Sir, said Commander Cho Hyejin, we're receiving transmission requests from thousands of worlds. They want to join what they're calling the Free Galaxy Alliance. Taeho smiled and looked out at the stars. When they had left Earth, their goal had been simple. Make contact with alien life and prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Instead, they had accidentally started a revolution that changed the nature of the universe itself. Open the channels, he said. Let's see what we can build together. Engineer Kim Do-young looked up from his computer console. Sir, I'm detecting ships approaching from the outer rim. Dozens of them, all broadcasting human identification codes. More of our people coming to help? Asked Taeho. No, sir, said Kim Do-young with a grin. According to these signals, they're refugees, humans who heard what happened here and decided they wanted to be part of building something better. In the months and years that followed, the galaxy would, change in ways no one could have predicted. The Free Galaxy Alliance would grow into something unprecedented, a true democracy of worlds where every species had a voice, where conflicts were resolved through cooperation instead of conquest, and where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. The transformed apex would keep its promise, challenging civilizations that grew too comfortable and helping them rediscover their strength. But it would never again be the mindless destroyer it had once been, and humanity would take its place not as conquerors of the galaxy, but as something far more dangerous and far more valuable. They had become hope itself. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the observation deck of the station, now renamed Haven Station, and watched ships from 100 different worlds docking with beings who had chosen to build a better future together. Behind him, the voices of humans and aliens working side by side filled the corridors with the sound of progress. In a universe that had been ruled by fear for millions of years, one small species from an unremarkable blue planet had proven something that changed everything. Sometimes the best way to survive in a galaxy full of predators is to refuse to be prey.